Welcome to the Can Innovate podcast, the first ever podcast designed to showcase Canadian thought leadership. These innovators share industry insights, entrepreneurial best practices, lessons learned, and other tips that we can incorporate right into our lives, our careers, and our businesses. So let's get inspired. I just recorded an amazing episode with Meredith Messenger, who is a sales guru itself. This episode is actually pretty special to me because we talk about one of my favorite topics, sales. We end up talking about how to make sales not feel so scary and how sales should actually be an essential life skill and different areas of our lives that we actually use sales. We actually even have a bit of a discussion and a little bit of a debate of whether or not the art of cold calling is dead. We talk about our sales pet peeves, and boy, I've got a bunch of them. And so Meredith is brilliant beyond belief. She gives us some typical mistakes people make and how to avoid those mistakes. And we even talk a little bit about how to utilize some sales technology to really ramp up your sales cycle and be able to measure things. There's just so much value bombs you're going to get from this episode. It is amazing. I also have another little freebie for you. I just recorded a webinar on common sales proposal mistakes. So I've put the link in the show notes. Please check it out. It was really, really great. It was the first webinar of the new year to start off our sales cycle. Anyways, enjoy episode 68, The Sales Essentials with Meredith Messenger. Hey, innovators, I've got an amazing guest today. I've got Meredith Messenger, who is very well versed in the demands of running a one-person shop and the struggles that many startups and small and medium-sized businesses have with predictable revenue. She is the founder of Selling with Soul and the host of Selling with Soul podcast. That's right. She is my podcast buddy. That's for sure. But she's brilliant. She is an absolute genius when it comes to being a revenue coach, a sales consultant, and she knows amazing strategies and techniques, but how to have really great revenue strategy development, sales consulting, how to build amazing sales teams. You got it, you name it, but sales, she helps everybody. So this is one of my favorite guests that I'm really excited. We've been trying to schedule for quite some time, but she's been so busy with all of her clients, her speaking engagements. So we are really lucky to get Meredith in the house.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for that awesome introduction. I'm going to come here every single day so I can hear that.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Okay, so Meredith, I love the topic of sales because it is a big, scary word. Everyone needs to do it. Everyone needs to have it as an essential life skill, and yet everyone struggles and is scared of it. What's with the word sales? That's so scary.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny. So I think for me, and I love working with sales adverse people. So that's people who already have a negative opinion of sales and are like, I don't want anything to do with it. I hate it, but I know I have to do it in order to grow my business or be successful in my career, right? And so I think people have a really negative impression of sales because they've gone through negative sales experiences, right? We all hate that feeling of being sold to, like we're trapped and we can't get out of this horrible conversation with the person who doesn't care about us at all, who just wants to push their crap on us. Excuse me if you guys are offended by that, but they just want to push their own agenda on us, right? And like nobody likes that. It doesn't feel good. And so those are the memories that people tend to bring up when you bring up the word sales. It's the negative experiences, because when you're being sold to effectively, you don't know you're being sold to. It doesn't feel like that. So nobody makes the connection with those positive experiences. And I think the other thing is out in the business world, people make sales out to be super complicated, and it doesn't have to be. My mission and my motto and all of this is like, how do we simplify sales? How do we put the fun back in sales and convince people that it's really just about serving another person? It's helping another person or business connect with and find something that's going to benefit them. And when you start to look at that mindset shift, then sales stops being icky and it starts being kind of cool.
I love that. I love that. It's really just helping and building relationships, and you're adding value to them. Like, you're just like, hey, here's something you may be interested in and may not be. But you're right. It doesn't have to feel like a used car salesman type of model. Things have definitely changed, but I always think of, the car sales guy or the door knocker, like the door-to-door guy. And you're like, oh man, like, why did I answer that door? Like, you just kind of, you're right. It is, you get that negative experience.
Yeah. It's human nature. I think negativity, like a negative experience, sticks in your mind much more brilliantly than the more positive ones, which is unfortunate, right? Because we have so many positive things that happen on a daily basis. So I just think it's human nature to be that way.
Yeah, totally. So I got a question from one of our listeners, because I actually mentioned that I did a sales proposal webinar about what are some typical mistakes people make. And one of the questions someone got, and I thought, oh, I'll just ask the sales guru herself so she can give it the right information, is there a difference between sales and business development? So I thought I'd ask you that.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So like, I think traditionally, like if we're talking like the strict sort of like scholarly definition of business development versus sales, there is a difference. So in traditional, the way that you look at traditional sales, business development is more around strategic alliances and partnerships, different things that you can do to extend the reach of your sales team. So think alternative distribution models. For those of you who are less familiar with that phrase, it's like basically who can I work with that can also help me get more of my stuff into the hands of people who need it. So business development traditionally sticks to things like that, where sales, in a very strict sense, tends to be the ones responsible for going out and generating new business with individuals, whether they're individual businesses or individual people. And they, depending on how you're organized, they will see that sale from front to end, meaning finding a potential client and closing a deal with a potential client. Or sometimes in more modern sales, we're going into different models like pods, and we can talk about that like later. But the more innovative way of looking at sales teams. So there is a difference traditionally. Now, that being said, I don't believe that there's any difference. When I look at sales, I look at it all as a sale. Whether you're going out and trying to find strategic partnerships or you're going out and trying to find that perfect client, how you talk and the essence of what sales is exactly the same thing. You are presenting a value to the person or business that you're speaking to, and you need to sell it either which way. In order to get people to work with you, it's a sale. In order to get a client to buy from you, it's a sale. So in my mind, it's very similar, and how we go about it might be a little bit different, but it's all the same. In my mind, everything in life is a sale. Convincing my husband to marry me was a sale, right? Or convincing my toddler to put on his shoes because he friggin' hates shoes is a whole nother sale, right? So we're all selling all the time. But so traditionally, the traditionalist would say, yes, business development is different.
No, I love it. Because, and by the way, I agree with you. I think business development and sales, it's really as an end-to-end. It's a whole package. But you're right. Everything we do in life is a sale. We're constantly selling ourselves as a brand, as a person. And, and I think we forget that. It's all about, I have an objective. I'm trying to get there. What are the different avenues I can make that happen? And I think we forget that whole thing. I actually do kind of wonder if, now this is just an opinion piece, I'm wondering, sales is kind of like a life skill. That's how I kind of, brand it as. Should we be learning this type of stuff at school a little bit more or in universities and college so it doesn't feel so kind of icky to those words? Like, do you think it's something that they should be developing earlier on?
Yes. Yeah. See, this is why I love you and I love this podcast. You're brilliant. Yeah, I do. I think like instead of making sales like this whole sort of like thing about revenue generation, if we look at sales at the university level as part of how we operate. So you're a young person, you're going into the workforce, you are selling yourself on the value that you can provide to another company. I know the show is full of a lot of innovators. So people who are inventing new things and have like pretty radical ideas on how things can be different going forward. You're selling that, right? And so all of that is a sale. And if we have a more structured approach to how we look at it and we sort of disarm people through the educational system around what sales is, it's going to be easier. It's not going to have that same stigma applied to it. But the other reason why I think that's brilliant is because there's a lot of really bad salespeople, like just genuinely bad, and they give a really bad name to everybody else. For instance, like I got this email on LinkedIn, a connection request, and I accepted it. And immediately after I accepted it, this person wrote to me to sell me something. It was this really obnoxious email. But what I found most obnoxious about it was that they actually were trying to sell me on sales coaching. I'm a flippin' sales consultant. Like, are you serious right now? So that means to tell me that you didn't read my profile at all. You didn't care at all about what I did. You did not put value first. So if that person had had the opportunity to be exposed to a really solid modern sales methodology, this never would have happened to them. And I guarantee you that if they're doing it to me, they're doing it to like 50,000 other people, which is making all of those people hate salespeople.
Yes. I totally get that. And honestly, it's so spammy. It's like you put no effort. Even when I get requests to be on the podcast, no one actually has done any research about what I do on this podcast. And I'm like, seriously, it's just like so you think sales is a volume-based thing? Isn't it better to have like 2 or 3 qualified leads versus, sending out hundreds of emails? And my other big pet peeve is, since we're talking about things that drive me nuts, when people send me things about how they could do SEO or marketing or all that stuff, and their email address is a Hotmail address or a Gmail address.
Yeah, I got one that had like a WhatsApp number to it. I'm like, yeah, because WhatsApp is not sketchy at all. Like, that's how I do all my business. Like, really? That's crazy. I totally agree. And so, similar rant while we're on the topic is, I think that if I were to go into, or you and I were to go into a business where we reach out to people for media opportunities, like say my business was working with clients to get them on other people's podcasts, we would kill it because those people are terrible. Stop pitching me on things that have nothing to do with my podcast. Like I almost, one of them was so bad that I almost went to their client and said, I need you to know what they're doing that you're paying for because it's so bad. It's like, it's just terrible. It's awful. So, but at any rate, if we're able to kind of intercept that on the university level or a little bit sooner, then I think that would prevent a lot of the downstream awfulness that we tend to experience. So I think it's a fantastic idea.
Oh, I think it'd be fun. I think we should do it. I think we should pitch it and teach them because, ultimately what you're saying is, when we tailor it to an actual person and did a bit of research, this is back to our old models of consultative selling, like way back because both Meredith and I are both are management consultants, and that's where we came from, is that you get schooled in that about making the experience so easy to recognize of where the value is going to be because we've done research on their business. So we know exactly where we can help them and we make it a lot more bespoke. And I think that, again, it's just everyone has this sense of urgency and that I'll send out 100 emails and, someone's going to respond. It's insane. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting that you use the word insane. I was actually just talking to a client the other day who was doing a lot of outbound outreach on LinkedIn. And he was saying, I sent thousands or however many, it was quite a lot of LinkedIn emails. And I said, well, what's the response been like? He's like, I got maybe 2. It's okay. I said, that is the definition of insanity. You are doing the same thing over and over again and not getting any results, but then expecting to continue to do it and get more results. So let's stop and take a breath and see what's not working in that process and really dissect it. And I think that it's that, to your point, everybody's so crazy busy and trying to get the numbers up there. And some of that comes from sales management. So if there are sales leaders listening to the podcast, I'm doing an awesome webinar next week on how to transition into a sales culture. And a lot of it comes from leadership. So measuring the right metrics are really important because if we're pushing all of our salespeople just to hit activity numbers, we are pushing for the wrong things. That's where our quality starts to suffer. So really looking at how we're measuring success, to your point, quality over quantity is really important. Because I know a lot of these salespeople are feeling that pressure and that's why they're doing what they're doing. But there's got to be a better way. And those sales leaders have to transition out of the old way of thinking about this and into the world of modern selling, because that's not how modern selling works.
No, that's a good point. That's a good point. I mean, that's just kind of you've sent out an email. That's a kind of, okay, maybe a potential lead, but you haven't actually qualified it for the level of maturity. Right. So it's just kind of putting in a bunch of stuff to say, oh yeah, I've got a pipeline of X number of dollars versus this is an actual pipeline of maturity at 70% that's going to convert. So how do people manage their businesses when they don't understand what's really going to happen or
that's right.
Delivery models? Like, yeah,
that's right. Well, and there's a metric that doesn't get measured with that too, that I have no way of measuring, but it would be awesome if we could. It's the negative impact. Because so if you're an individual salesperson or an entrepreneur, the negative impact is on your brand and you as a person. But also as a sales leader, if your sales team is doing that, the negative impact is on your entire company brand. So you have to think about what you are coercing to get out there into the world and if it's worth it. Because if you did have a qualified sort of lead list of people who were target clients, you just killed 50% of it, right? And it takes a long time to recover, if ever, from that, because people don't want anything to do with it. So there's a lost opportunity cost there. And I don't know exactly how to measure it, but it's a real thing. So just things to consider as you're managing your teams.
Oh, that's brilliant. Oh, that is so good. This is why I love you, Meredith, because you really have these different perspectives and insights, and you've seen it all. Now, let's just talk about something else that's been driving me insane. Is cold calling dead? Are those door-to-door knockers dead? Like, is that model like dead, and no one kind of sent them a blurb to let them know? Like, I still get so many friggin' telemarketing calls or even text messages about things, and I'm like, what? So is this model completely gone?
Well, you're opening up a bit of a can of worms. This is a hugely hotly debated thing in the world of sales and revenue generation. And you have people who stand very firm in both extreme spectrums. So you have people who stand very firm in, yes, it's dead and everything can be done through social selling. And you have people who stand in the opposite sort of corner, very far oppositionally, that says absolutely not. Outbound reach is very critical to the growth of a business. And so when I'm in these debates, I have to consider a few different things. There is no right or wrong answer to this. There's people making a ton of money using outbound, like cold calling and cold outreach, but doing it really well. And I think that's the difference between the type of people that you're talking about and then the successful ones. And then there's some people who are using social selling and doing that really, really well. But you have to understand what social selling is. I think a lot of people look at social selling and say, I'm going to go on LinkedIn, I'm going to send an email, and I'm going to close business. That is not social selling. It's all the same as all selling has ever been. It's opening a door to the next step in relationship building. So social selling is just about providing value and getting to the point where they'll take a phone call from you or they'll take a meeting with you because you provided value, right? So social selling is, the name of it is a little, to me, it's off. It should be like social door opening. But it's the same things that you talk about. It's networking. It's just networking online versus networking in person. These are not new ideas. It's just the tools that are new. So hopefully that answers your question. It depends on the business model. And I know that a lot of your listeners are entrepreneurs and they're building big things. And when you're at that phase of business, as you know, as a management consultant, you have to proactively develop business. The business is not going to come to you. And so therefore outreach, like that area where a lot of people get uncomfortable talking to people they don't know in one form or another, has to happen in order for your business to be successful. I've never seen a business be successful without doing that in the first many years, right? 5 years or more. And then you look at some of the world's most successful businesses, like the biggest businesses in the world, they all have teams who still do cold outreach. There's something to be said for it. So it's not dead.
It's not dead. Okay, so there's just a place. If they've done doing it well, then it works well. If they're not doing it well, so they need to really understand the conversion rates to actually be able to understand if it's working or not. And if it's not working, then it's time to adopt probably a new sales model and distribution model. I like that.
Or tweak what you're doing. I mean, so for instance, I wouldn't tell my client that's using LinkedIn that's not seeing success that LinkedIn won't work for them. What I'm saying is let's reevaluate how you're using the tool and see if we can get it to be more effective for you. Like in his particular case, he's going from 0 to trying to close. So we have to view the sales cycle as steps. And LinkedIn is providing the first step in the sales cycle or the sales process for him. So the tool itself isn't useless. It's how he's using the tool. It's the same thing as outreach, cold outreach. I'll tell you this though, that if you're a selling adverse person or you're not, this isn't like your gig and you don't love it, I would never ask you to start making cold calls immediately. Because it's not aligned with your personality. You're not familiar with how it's going to go. You need a little bit of help and some guidance and some confidence building to get you there and then to do it effectively. And here's another secret. Nobody likes cold calling. There's whole teams of people who do cold calling for very successful companies and other sales consultants, and they don't love it. It's just something that they do every day. It's part of their daily routine. And so when you think about it that way, you get through it, you do it the best that you can, and then you evaluate whether or not it works, right? I think people sometimes have the perception that you like it or you don't. And it's true. It's not true. Most people don't like it at all. 99% of the people of the world don't like calling someone they don't know and interrupting their day.
Oh, that's so true. I keep forgetting about the person on the other end, that they probably don't like their job and they're doing it and they have to do it. But ultimately, they need to have that paycheck. Yeah, I have to be honest. I don't have patience when people call me out of the blue because I actually find it puts me in defense because honestly, it's a limited time offer. Well, I haven't had time to do research. Like, I don't understand. Now I understand the value that you're talking about, but now I want to do comparison, but you're not allowing me to have that opportunity. Mm-hmm. And I hate that time limited type of sales opportunity. And I'm like, oh, and every time I hear it, I'm like, you know what? I go back to the old saying, if it's too good to be true, then,
It probably is, yeah. Well, so so two things. How would that experience change if this person had engaged with you online? Maybe they found you, let me give you a scenario. Maybe they found you on LinkedIn and they said, okay, here's what you do. And I developed a research piece that I went through 30 of the world's top CEOs and got all their insights on what's going to be critical to them in 2019. I think this would really help you do your job. And I'd love to share that with you. And I send it to you. And you say, okay, so now you know who I am and you know I have some knowledge of what I'm talking about. I sent you something that was valuable or insightful, whatever. And then I reached out again, maybe 2 weeks later, and I said, I hope you really enjoyed what I sent over. I'm wondering if we could set up some time to talk about it really quickly and how other clients of mine have really used information like that in the past, because I think it'll position you well to be more successful. Would you take that call?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And your outlook coming into that call would be different, because now you know that A, I know what I'm talking about. B, I'm putting you first and I'm trying to help you, enable you to do your thing better, right? And I didn't say, let's call so I can tell you about what I do. I didn't say, let's have a call so I can tell you how awesome I am or how much stuff I can get done for you. No, I said, here, I have this tool and I really think it would be insightful for you and help you run a better business. So that's a different experience. And so at that point, now the conversation's changed. You've put the client first. You've got a foot in the door. You're providing value first. And at the end of that conversation, you can say something to them like, I'd love to learn a little bit more about your business at some point if you think it makes sense. Does it make sense to schedule something?
Oh, and I would be like, absolutely. Like, right. Let's talk because you're going to help me. Like, you're right. Teaching me something that I did not know. And
right.
Yeah, I love that.
And that to me is what modern selling is, right? So that's an example of how you can take yourself out of that sleazy space and into that. I have a gift to offer the world. In your case, I have a gift to offer people who are trying to build businesses. I really want to make sure that you know about it, like in a way that's putting you first. And so that's modern selling, right? Modern selling is about that. How do you do that? How do you make people feel good about themselves and about talking to you?
Oh, that's brilliant. So out of curiosity, is there a lot of new kind of technology that people should be using or thinking about when it comes to sales? Because, you hear all the stuff with CRM and all the email marketing. There's so many different tools. Like I know you are a CRM girl, but so can we talk a little bit about some of these technology that people can kind of enable?
Yeah. I had on episode 20, depending on when you're listening to this podcast, if you listen to episode 20 of the Selling with Soul podcast, I have a gentleman on who is a sales and technology expert, and he's like so phenomenal. You guys should check out that episode. But essentially what we talked about are what are the cornerstone pieces of technology that startups and entrepreneurs should have. People are running like really lean organizations because your technology needs change and grow over time depending on your industry, but also like where you're at in your business life cycle. So if we start with like the less complex, the startups, the lean organizations, maybe solopreneurs or entrepreneurs with small teams, it's really the cornerstone of everything that you're going to do in sales and marketing is going to be your customer relationship management system, which is what you just mentioned, right? Your CRM. And CRMs run the gamut from super complex to very simple, lean, and agile. And Miles actually recommends, he was the guest on my show, using Nimble as a CRM. And I actually just checked that out. It's awesome. It's very straightforward. It's easy to use. But essentially, what any of these systems allow you to do is create a database, an easy to access segment list of your contacts, clients, and prospects. And this is really important because you need to be able to keep track of where you are in the deal life cycle with any particular client. You also need to be able to keep in touch with your network. So how do you keep track of like key dates? How do you know when to follow back up with clients? That is a hugely costly mistake that I see entrepreneurs make. They don't have a follow-up system in place. They don't have a way of maintaining a rigor around how they reach out to clients, how they close deals, keeping things on track. And your CRM system will help you with that. So there's a lot of things in there that you can automate. You can automate emails. You can automate templates to go out that you send on a routine basis. Miles has some great ideas. So check out that episode because he's got other really cool actionable ideas on how to use it.
So for our listeners out there, I'm going to definitely link in the show notes, episode 20. So it's just be a click away so that you can definitely take a listen to it because this will be a definitely interesting conversation to hear. And I can't wait to check out this Nimble. and that it's easy. Because I find that there's a lot of CRM tools. It's just so difficult to kind of navigate and to utilize, or some of them are just focusing on the marketing side and they don't actually connect it with the sales side. So you don't get the 360-degree view of that customer, and but they're using the same words, CRM, but it's not about the full. So it's always kind of,
and they're expensive. They're really expensive. Like, so the big behemoths in the space, for those of you who have maybe more complex businesses, are going to be Salesforce, which is like the OG, like the original gangster of the CRM world, right? I find Salesforce to be unwieldy. It's huge. Oftentimes you need customization to it to make it work right. It's expensive. It's good for complex sales cycles. If you're in a technology sale, if you're working with bigger teams where sales and marketing need to integrate, it can be really helpful for that. But too much for most of us. The other one that's big in the space is HubSpot, which I used a little bit. I also find it a little unwieldy. It gets very expensive if you're a small startup. But certainly a lot of my peers see huge results with HubSpot. It does. So the benefit of HubSpot is more on the marketing side, does a lot of inbound marketing, lead generation, has a lot of social intelligence built into it. So it's a pretty powerful tool. It's just, for me and the size of my business, it's not been great, but I have clients that have done a great job with it. And I will consider as my business grows. So I think the CRM is really important. And then some way of emailing everybody, obviously. Get on MailChimp. It's free until you have 2,000 people. Or I use Drip, which is great for people selling products and e-commerce type of solutions. But there's a lot of those out there. So you need those. And then lastly, I think the biggest up and coming thing that we should throw into this list are bots. And bots are a hugely debated thing in the sales world. So AI, right? Like, what role can AI play in sales? And there's a lot of people way smarter than me talking about this. And again, it's one of those things people either react like horrifically to it, or they're like, yeah, bots are great. So there's a lot of really strong opinions on it. Here's what I would say. My humble opinion is bots are great for routine tasks, things that are simple. And they're great if you're transparent with the fact that it's a bot. I think where people start to get themselves in trouble is when they're pretending bots are them and people feel duped by it. So we never want to lie to people. We're never trying to manipulate people, in my opinion. I don't work with businesses like that. So use carefully. Bots can be super powerful. And the other place I think AI can be really powerful in sales right now is in the idea of data, predictive analytics, understanding so this is for bigger companies. This is a complex theory, but understanding when a client is most likely to open your email based on all of the social data that exists on the internet. We can do that now. We can base our calls around times when this particular individual, when Meredith is most likely to answer her phone. That data exists. And AI can help us with that and set us up for success when we're doing our sales and prospecting tasks. It can qualify the pipeline for us. It can really help us refine our target market and who's making us the most money in our books of business so that we can go after more. It can help us find more like that. So it's really powerful on the data side. Where I start to fall off the AI sort of bandwagon is when the debate comes around to AI replacing human beings in sales. I completely disagree with that theory. Sales is all about one human being talking to another. Psychologically, how we make our buying decisions is on an emotional level. We will not have the same emotional response to a robot that we'll have to each other. I don't believe that at all. So that's where I start to say AI, no, I don't think AI is going to replace salespeople. Transitional sales, if you're selling products transactional, smaller purchases, non-complex sales cycles, those can probably be automated, right? But when we start talking about things that require human interaction, AI will never take the place of a human.
Yeah, and it shouldn't. This is really insightful because it really shouldn't be replace it, because the whole thing about sales is about relationships. And, if you're selling a one-time thing, fine, I guess. But if you're trying to build a relationship or get referrals or any of those things, I think that part of the world has kind of also disappeared too, in that sense of that, account management, that whole relationship piece that, to your point, sales is a very emotional thing. People are trusting you with their money. They're trusting you to make them look like a rock star. So you need to be able to do it, but they need to talk to somebody. So yes, that's really, really interesting.
Well, the other interesting part about that is if you think about the especially here in the United States, the transition of our economy into a gig culture, there's so much of our economy right now is growing around service-based businesses. So the idea that you can kind of go out, take your expertise and do your own gig with it or contract out or whatever, that could never be an artificial intelligence sale. That is literally you're selling yourself. So you cannot use anybody other than yourself to sell it, right? Because like nobody will know who you are. So not to put the obvious out there, but like there's so much of our economy is based around that human factor that I just don't see it happening right now.
Oh, I love it. But so out of curiosity, is there any other big mistakes that people make when it comes to sales? Especially for new salespeople.
Yeah. So number one, I think the biggest thing that I see is people don't ask for the business. And it sounds so counterintuitive and so basic, but you have this great conversation. Say you're in a discovery call, maybe you're a consultant or a coach or anyone, even a technology salesperson, and you get to the point in the deal or the call or the meeting where it's time to actually close, which scares people. So I'm trying to think of another word to call it, but they don't actually ask for the business. And the biggest thing that I can say, I listen to all these calls, I listen to a lot of videos. So when I'm interacting or I'm coaching people or I'm a consulting, I'm observing. Sometimes I have them set up an iPad so I can see. Sometimes I listen on the phone. Sometimes I'm there, right? But either which way, I want to hear how that conversation is going. And we get to this awkward point in the call. It's the end. You're wrapping up. You've done a great job. I can feel the momentum on the client side. And then we stop. Okay, well, thank you so much for your time today. No, I want to kill you. You have that sale. So they're not, very rarely, like almost never is a potential client going to say to you, I want to work with you. Okay. When they do, it's a gift from God. It's raining from heaven. Embrace it. But you have to ask your clients to work with you. And so I think a lot of times people are like, well, what do I say? So we practice comfortable words like, does it make sense for us to? I have an opening on the 14th. I could fit you in. Does it make sense for me to send you the proposal? So if you're not comfortable with that really direct ask, figure out what language does work for you. Does it make sense to, should we move forward? I think are very like disarming ways of asking because you're giving the other person the opportunity to say no. A lot of my clients will be like, well, I feel like I'm pressuring them. I'm like, but you've asked them. It's a question. You haven't told them. They can say no. They're grown-ups, right? But you have to ask for the business or ask for the next step. If you're not asking for what you want, you're never going to get it. So I think that's probably the number one mistake new sellers make. And then a close second is rushing the sales cycle. So like we talked about earlier with LinkedIn, really understanding what the different steps are to move a client forward in the journey. And I call it a buyer's journey. I hate the word funnel. I know a lot of people use sales funnels, but to me, a sales funnel is you focused, where a buyer's journey is client buyer focused. So you're able to make that comfortable for them. But really understanding what all those steps are and being able to know what a win is. A win on LinkedIn is getting a meeting. A win from that meeting is maybe getting them to agree to pull their product team in and let you do a demo. A win from that demo might be them saying, well, why don't you submit a proposal and come in and do a presentation? A win from that presentation might be they're going to shop it to their CEO. So whatever your sales cycle is, understand that it's not one sale. It's broken down into several sales that you do throughout the entire process. And don't get discouraged when you don't go from LinkedIn to CEO in a day.
I love that. I love that. By the way, I just think you are absolutely brilliant. And I love the fact that you're giving tips about how to close that sale, that conversation, because it does get a little awkward at the end. It's like that date, right? At the end, like, do I kiss them? Do I not? Like, it gets a little awkward at the end, right?
Yeah.
So it's nice that you've kind of given some ideas of how to kind of, does it make sense to kind of schedule something on the 14th, or can I send you the proposal? What do we think is the next step? And we're having a discussion of what do both of us, we together, agree on. That's what right. is the next step. So I love that you have that That's kind right. of, hey, we're in it together. We've turned it from I and you to us. So it has that team flair.
And here's my last tip. Can I throw one more in?
Absolutely.
Just because you're the seller doesn't mean that you have any less say in anything than the buyer does. So I guess my point is this. You are not powerless because you're selling. So I see a lot of people say, well, I can't do that, or I wouldn't say no, or I can't put pressure on them. That's not true. You have something of value to offer this person that you're speaking to. And as long as you're not wasting your time, you're not any less than they are in the conversation. They don't rule you. So a lot of times people get in these situations where they're like, well, I had to agree to that because otherwise I wouldn't get the sale. Or I had to change my contract because otherwise I wouldn't get the sale. Or I asked for 20% less than I know I need to make on my margins because I wouldn't get the sale. All wrong. All wrong. You do not lose all of your power because you're on the selling end of this. In fact, I would argue that you have the power because you have something valuable. So don't act like, or don't be fooled into thinking that you have to say yes to everything, or you have to change the way that you do everything in order to get clients. The right clients will find you. You do not have to sacrifice or settle. So that's my last soapbox done, but you don't have to be a victim to your buyers.
No, that's great tip, because you're right. People probably discount things before they even actually have talked about the value and all the other pieces of it without even talking. So why do it? Like, why not have the discussion? If you're going to discount, that means I have to take out X, Y, and Z to make your price point. Right. That's okay. We can de-scope it. It's totally cool. Like, let's just have that real conversation. So
that's right.
Two, our expectations are aligned of each other. And, I think it's a very healthy type of conversation to have. Yeah. Oh, good tip. Yeah. Good tip. Now, for those that are just getting into kind of the idea or maybe into sales, do you have like a book that you recommend itself that they may want to think about? I know putting you on the spot there, but something like a beginner's guide to sales. Yeah. Is there something like that?
There's a lot. So I'm looking around. I have a ton of books in my office. One of the books that I love is called Selling Boldly. And it's not a famous book. It's not a book that people refer to often. But what it is it's a book that combines positive psychology into sales. And so essentially what it does is it helps you build your resiliency, which is going to be the number one thing that's going to keep you going as an entrepreneur or as an individual salesperson. So it gives you all kinds of scripts and ideas around how do you protect your resiliency? How do you build it? How do you collect client testimonials to keep your motivation and your mindset strong? Because mindset, I'll be honest, I think it's 80% of selling. So it's all about mindset. It gives you some nice scripts, some way of tracking your daily activities. I think it's very approachable for non-sales professionals and new sales professionals. So that's a good book. You have all of your old standbys. I mean, anything by Jeffrey Gitomer, I read a lot of. I grew up reading Jeffrey Gitomer's books. The Little Red Book of Selling is a famous kind of like intro to selling book. And another book that I love, if maybe you're in a little bit more complex sale, anything on consultative selling is great, but Deb Calvert has some really great books. Her newest one is Stop Selling and Start Leading. So that's all about how you're actually a leader and not a salesperson. So that's a really great book. And her book, Power Questions That Get You Connected, is an oldie, but a really goodie. It talks all about the power of questions to fuel your sales and to build relationships quickly with your buyers. So check out those books.
Oh, I love it. So let's talk about your podcast, because I'm actually a bit of your podcast fan. I've been listening to quite a few of your episodes, and they are amazing. So guys, I will definitely put the link in the show notes, but her podcast, But Selling with Soul, is that she takes each episode and it's around a theme of something. So one that I was listening to was about discovery calls, and she takes it so like easy and made it so friendly. So where did the inspiration to come up with this podcast come from?
Well, anybody who knows me knows I love to talk. I am not short on words, and I love to meet new people. But no, honestly, I think that there's a lot of sales, and I'm using air quotes, you guys can't see me, but like sales gurus out there. And I was listening to a lot of them. I disagree with a lot of the things that they're saying, or it just didn't resonate with me. It wasn't put in a way that I thought was approachable. Sales has always been viewed as sort of an aggressive thing. Even the words that we use with sales are aggressive. Like, I want to beat my competition. I want to push my prospect through the pipeline. It's a very sort of aggressive and sleazy in a lot of ways looking at sales. And so a lot of it didn't resonate with me. And I said, well, if I have these thoughts and if I have these ideas, or if these things don't resonate with me, there's probably others out there that feel this way. And so how podcasting is a really great forum for me to be able to get that out there, that sales can be fun. Sales can be feminine, not to turn off male buyers, right? But we don't have to use all these masculine words like annihilating our competition. Like, it can be feminine. It can be fun. It can be approachable. I think in some ways, some of the sales leaders out there really push people away from sales because it seems very intimidating. So it was about putting approachable ideas out there, and it gave a nice platform for me to showcase people who are doing really great things in the world. My business is based around promoting small businesses and the benefits that they drive into entire communities and societies, right? It literally, running a successful business can transform not only that family's life, but the lives of the entire community around them. And it grows from there. It's like a ripple effect. So for me, it was a way of putting people in the spotlight, that are supporting that are getting people the information that they need so they can be successful, so they can do these life-changing and world-altering things. Businesses go out of business thousands by the day, but it's not because their ideas stink. It's because they can't sell. So how do we fix that? Because there are amazing ideas that the world are losing every single day because they can't sell. So let's fix it. Let's get people out there. Let's arm them with what they need. Let's not make them sales gurus, but let's help them figure out how to embrace their personality and sell authentically and effectively. That's the gig. And that's why I started the podcast.
Oh, but honestly, your podcast is really amazing because it really kind of makes sales fun. Like every episode I listen to, I kind of get, oh, I love that idea. And I always come back with aha, and it's really good value stuff out there. But I really like it that you break it down into smaller chunks. So it makes it easy to digest, and it doesn't feel overwhelming or overcomplicated. So anyways, congratulations on your podcast. Huge fan. I'm going to be the first one to admit I'm a girl fan of yours now. So this is really great stuff.
Well, thank you so much for your kind words, and thank you for having me on this podcast. You're doing amazing things in the world, and that's why you and I are so well aligned. You know, you're putting amazing things out there. You're growing a business that's going to change things for people for years to come, and businesses for years to come. So you keep up the good work. I'll keep up the hard work, and together we will make the world amazing.
I agree. And by the way, we both love to talk a lot, so I think that's another reason why we connected so quick. So thanks, Meredith, for being on the podcast. Honestly, you've just been so insightful, brilliant as usual, and I can't wait. And maybe we'll have you back on again so you can tell us a little bit more what's kind of going on in your world.
I would love that. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everyone, for joining in and tuning in this week. Next week, you got another really cool episode. I hope you enjoyed the sneak peek. I'm going to try to do this and see how this works. If you guys are interested, like the little sneak teasers, let me know. I'd love to hear back from all of you. And don't forget to hit subscribe and leave a review. And let me know if you know of another Canadian innovator that's doing something really cool around the world. Let's get them showcased. Or if there's an innovation trend that you would like to specifically focus on. Anyways, looking forward to hearing from all of you, and talk to you next week. Cheers.